Daniel Cross walked slowly down the narrow hallway of the colony ship Aurora. The walls were gray, the air smelled of metal and oil, and the faint hum of the ship's engines vibrated under his boots. He carried a small tray in his hands, bread, dried fruit, and a flask of water. The food was not meant for him, it was for the prisoner. The prisoner's cell was at the far end of the block. Guards usually passed it without stopping, treating it like a sealed box, something best ignored. But Daniel stopped every day. He pressed his hand against the door panel, and the steel bars slid apart with a groan. Inside sat the alien woman. Her skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, a pale silver that seemed almost unreal. Her hair, long and dark, fell across her shoulders. She was thin, too thin, and her eyes, large, violet, and heavy with exhaustion, lifted toward him as the door opened. "Food," Daniel said softly, setting the tray down on the floor just inside the cell. The alien did not speak at first. She simply looked at the food, then at him, as though wondering if it was a trick. Slowly, carefully, she reached forward and picked up the bread. She ate it with small bites, like someone who had gone without meals for too long. Daniel stayed silent, leaning against the wall. His fellow soldiers had laughed at him when they found out. They said he was wasting supplies on something that should never have been taken alive. A raider, they called her. A threat. A beast in human shape. But when Daniel looked at her, he didn't see a beast. He saw someone broken, someone hungry, someone alone. "Why do you do this?" a voice asked from behind. Daniel turned. Corporal Rayner, broad-shouldered and smirking, stood in the hall. Two other soldiers were with him. They leaned casually against the wall, watching like hunters mocking a younger recruit. "She doesn't deserve food," Rayner said. "She deserves an airlock." Daniel didn't answer. He just shrugged and looked back at the prisoner. "You're soft," another soldier sneered. "One day she'll bite you and we'll be the ones laughing." Daniel wanted to argue, but words would not change their minds. They had made him an outcast already. Instead, he simply replied, "Hunger makes any creature dangerous. Fed, she's less of a risk." The soldiers laughed at that. They left, muttering that Daniel would learn his lesson soon. When the corridor was quiet again, Daniel looked back at the alien. She had finished the bread and was sipping the water. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the flask. "What's your name?" Daniel asked, his voice low. For a long time, she didn't reply. Then slowly, with a faint accent, she whispered, "Liara." Daniel nodded. "I'm Daniel." She stared at him as though trying to understand. Then softly, she repeated his name. "Daniel." A strange warmth filled his chest. For weeks she had never spoken, never even tried. Now, one word had broken the silence. That night, as Daniel lay in his bunk, he thought about her. He remembered the first time he had seen her, dragged in by armored guards after a skirmish on the edge of the system. The officers said she was part of a raiding party, one of many alien bands that attacked human ships. But when Daniel had looked at her then, beaten and bound, she had not looked like a warrior. She had looked like a refugee. The others did not care. They spat on her name, refused to speak to her, treated her like a problem to be erased. But Daniel had always believed in listening. The next morning, he returned to her cell with another tray. She was waiting this time, sitting upright, her eyes brighter than before. "You feed me," she said, her words broken but clear. "Yes," Daniel said. "Why?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because you're alive, and because no one else will." She tilted her head as if testing the weight of his words. "Humans mock you." Daniel's lips curved in a bitter smile. "Yes, they think I'm foolish." Liara lowered her eyes. Foolish or kind? The word struck him. He wasn't sure what to say. No one had ever called him kind before. Days passed. Every day Daniel brought her food, and every day she tried a few more human words. She was learning quickly, far quicker than he expected. Sometimes she asked questions. "Why ship so far? Why war with us? Why no stars outside window? Daniel tried to answer, though he didn't always know how. He told her about Earth, about colonies, about the hope humans carried into the stars. She listened closely, her violet eyes never leaving his face, and sometimes she told him things. Fragments of her world, half-finished sentences about fleeing, about danger greater than humans could imagine. Something comes, she whispered one night as the ship slept. Not raiders, not me, bigger. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? But she only shook her head. They not believe, only mock. Word spread quickly among the crew. Daniel Cross, the alien's friend. Some soldiers refused to sit with him in the mess hall. Others whispered when he walked past. Even his commanding officer warned him to stop wasting his time. But Daniel did not stop. Something in Liara's eyes kept him coming back. He did not know it yet, but that choice, mocked by all, dismissed as weakness, was the single decision that would soon matter more than any battle, any order, any law, because the danger she spoke of was real. It was closer than anyone believed, and when it came, the same prisoner they despised would be the one to save them all, and she would save them because Daniel Cross, the outcast soldier, had once chosen kindness. Daniel Cross walked the same path again, the metal hallway echoing with his footsteps. He carried another tray of food. The routine had become familiar. He would bring bread, fruit, and water, sometimes soup if the kitchen had enough. Each time, he did it. He felt the eyes of the other soldiers on his back. They no longer laughed out loud when he passed, but he could feel their stares. They whispered, shaking their heads. To them, he was wasting supplies. To Daniel, he was keeping something alive that did not deserve to be forgotten. When he reached the cell, the door hissed open. Liara was already waiting. She stood near the corner, her violet eyes watching, as if she had been listening for him. You came, she said in her soft, broken voice. Daniel smiled faintly. I always come. He set the tray down, and she stepped forward quickly. Her movements were still weak, but every day she grew a little stronger. She sat down and began to eat. Better, she said between small bites. Food makes me better. Daniel nodded. That's the point. Liara paused and studied him. Why risk? Others hate. Daniel leaned against the wall. Because I don't think you're the monster they believe. You don't look like someone who wanted war. Her face darkened at the word war. She shook, her head slowly. Not war, fleeing. Daniel leaned closer. Fleeing? From what? Liara lowered her voice until it was barely a whisper. Dark swarm. Machines that eat worlds. We run, but swarm follows. Daniel frowned. Machines? She nodded. Not alive, not human, endless. For a moment, the hum of the ship seemed louder, like a warning in the air. Daniel wanted to ask more, but her eyes closed as if the memory itself drained her strength. That evening, Daniel sat alone in the mess hall. His squad ate at another table, their laughter sharp and careless. They no longer invited him to sit with them. He had stopped trying. Corporal Rayner walked past his table carrying a tray. He stopped and smirked. Still feeding your pet alien? Cross? Daniel looked up but didn't answer. Rayner leaned closer. She'll slit your throat one day, and when she does, don't expect us to cry for you. Daniel forced himself to stay calm. If she wanted to harm me, she's had plenty of chances. Rayner shook his head. You'll regret this. Then he walked away. Daniel sighed. He knew they would never understand. The next day, Daniel returned to Liara's cell with another tray. She greeted him with a small smile. It was the first time he had ever seen her smile. Daniel, she said, speaking his name more clearly now. Sit. He hesitated, then sat on the floor just outside the cell door. Liara sat inside, the tray between them. For a moment, it felt less like guard and prisoner and more like two people sharing a quiet meal. You teach, Liara said suddenly. Teach what? Daniel asked. Teach words. Human words. Daniel thought for a moment, then pointed at the bread. Bread, she repeated carefully. Bread. He pointed at the water. 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 He pointed at himself. Daniel. She hesitated, then touched her own chest. Liara. Daniel smiled. She was learning faster than he expected. Good, he said. Her eyes lit up. Good. Days turned into weeks. Each day, Daniel taught her new words, and each day, she grew stronger. She began to form small sentences. Ship is loud, she said one day. Yes, Daniel agreed. Engines. Engines, she repeated. Another day, she asked, why fight us? Daniel paused. Because your people attacked ours. That's what the officer said. Liara shook her head. Not attack. Desperate. We need supplies. We need safe place. But humans see us enemy. Daniel thought about it. Could it be true? Could the battles have been a misunderstanding born of fear and hunger? You should tell them, he said. Liara looked away. They will not listen. Only you. Daniel felt a weight in his chest. He knew she was right. The others would never listen to her voice. They barely listened to him. One evening, Daniel was walking back from the cell when Sergeant Hale stopped him. Hale was a strict man with a cold stare. Cross, Hale said. You're spending too much time with the prisoner. That's not your duty. Daniel stood tall. Sir, I believe she has information we should hear. Hale shook his head. Information? She's an enemy. You're being played. Stop wasting time or I'll reassign you. Daniel wanted to protest, but he swallowed his words. He knew pushing too hard would only make things worse. When he returned to his bunk, he lay awake, thinking. Liara's words echoed in his mind. Dark swarm, machines that eat worlds. Was it true? Or was it a story to gain sympathy, and yet, something in her eyes told him it was real? The next day, when Daniel brought food, Liara looked at him with urgency. Danger close, she whispered. Daniel frowned. What danger? Swarm, they come. Soon, Daniel's heart pounded. How do you know? Liara touched her chest. I feel it. My people. We sense their signals. Daniel stared at her, struggling to believe, yet unable to ignore the fear in her voice. If it's true, I have to warn them, he said. She shook her head quickly. They laugh, like always. Only you believe. Daniel clenched his fists. He hated that she was right. No one trusted him anymore. But deep down he knew he could not ignore her warning. That night the stars outside the ship looked strangely bright. Daniel stood by the viewing port, staring into the endless dark. For the first time he felt small, as if something vast and unseen was moving out there waiting. He thought about Liara, locked in her cell, mocked by everyone, yet still alive because he had chosen kindness. He thought about her smile when she learned new words and her fear when she spoke of the swarm, and he thought about what she had said. Only you believe. Daniel closed his eyes. He had no proof, no evidence, only her voice. But for some reason, he trusted her more than he trusted the officers, more than he trusted his own squad. Something was coming. He could feel it too, and soon the entire ship would know she was telling the truth. The ship Aurora drifted silently through space, its engines glowing faintly against the stars. Inside, the crew followed their daily routines, patrols, training drills, and reports. For most of them, life on board felt predictable, almost dull. But for Daniel Cross, the days were filled with unease. Every time he looked into Liara's violet eyes, he remembered her words. Danger close. Swarm comes soon. Daniel had not slept well since then. Each night he dreamed of endless machines tearing through the stars, devouring everything in their path. He woke sweating, his heart racing. He tried to dismiss it as imagination, but the fear clung to him. That morning, as he carried another tray of food, he found Liara waiting again, her hands clenched tightly. They come nearer, she said the moment he entered. Daniel knelt by the door. How can you be sure? Liara touched her head gently. We feel their signals, always searching, always moving, like storm before rain. Daniel swallowed hard. Her tone was certain, not hopeful, not manipulative, certain. I need to tell the commander, he said. Liara's face darkened. They will laugh. Again. Daniel thought of Raynor's smirk, of Hale's cold warning, of the whispers in the mess hall. She was right. They would laugh. But if she was telling the truth, silence could cost every life on this ship. I'll tell them anyway, Daniel said firmly. They need to know. Later that day, Daniel stood before Commander Voss, a tall, hard-eyed man who carried the weight of command like armor. Voss listened to Daniel's words with a frown. An alien prisoner told you this? Voss asked sharply. Yes, sir, Daniel replied. She says a swarm of machines is approaching. She claims they destroy worlds. I think we should at least check the long-range scanners. Voss leaned back in his chair. Cross, do you realize how this sounds? You're asking me to trust the word of a hostile prisoner over the judgment of my officers. Daniel clenched his fists at his sides. Sir, what if she's telling the truth? Telling the Q. What if she isn't? Voss shot back. We've seen no sign of enemy fleets, no unusual signals. You're letting sympathy cloud your judgment. It's not just sympathy, Daniel insisted. I've spoken to her for weeks. She's not lying. I can feel it. Voss shook his head. Feelings are not evidence. This discussion is over. You're dismissed. Daniel wanted to argue more, but he saw the cold certainty in the commander's eyes. Nothing he said would matter. When Daniel left the commander's office, Raynor was waiting in the corridor. His smirk returned the moment he saw Daniel's face. Let me guess, Raynor said. You told them about your alien's bedtime story. And they sent you packing. Daniel glared at him but kept walking. Raynor laughed and called after him. One of these days, Cross, your kindness is going to get us all killed. Daniel ignored the words, but they burned inside him. That evening, Daniel returned to Liara's cell. She was pacing like a caged animal, her movements sharp and restless. They didn't believe you, she said, reading his face instantly. No, Daniel admitted. They think it's a trick. Liara's shoulders slumped. For a moment, she looked so tired, so hopeless that Daniel's chest ached. I try to warn, she whispered. Always, no one listens. Until too late. Daniel sat against the wall, his hands on his knees. Then I'll listen, he said softly. Even if I'm the only one. Her violet eyes met his. For a long time, neither spoke. In that silence, something passed between them, a fragile trust that went deeper than words. 2 days later, the scanners detected faint signals in deep space. At first, the officers dismissed them as background noise, stray energy from distant stars. But the signals grew stronger. Daniel overheard the technicians whispering in the control room. Patterns, they said. Strange, repeating patterns. Not random at all. Daniel's heart raced. He hurried to Voss again. Sir, the signals. Liara warned me about this. Please, you have to believe me now. Voss frowned but gave no answer. That night, alarms echoed through the corridors. The crew scrambled from their bunks, weapons ready. On the main display, a cluster of moving objects had appeared on the edge of the system. They weren't ships, at least not ships in any human sense. They were swarms, shifting clouds of metallic fragments that glowed with unnatural light. They're heading straight for us, a technician reported, panic in his voice. For a moment, the command deck fell silent. Then Voss gave the order. All weapons ready, shields to maximum, prepare for engagement. The swarm advanced like a storm. Countless machines moved as one, surrounding the Aurora in seconds. The first wave struck the shields, sending a violent shudder through the ship. Daniel grabbed his seat, fear surging through him. Liara's warning was true. Every word was true. As the ship rocked under the assault, Daniel broke away from his post and sprinted toward the cell block. Smoke filled the halls, alarms flashing red. When he reached Liara's cell, she was already standing at the door, eyes blazing. "They are here," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Daniel's hands shook as he keyed the controls. The cell door opened with a hiss. "Come with me," he said. Liara stepped out, her movement strong now, no longer weak or helpless. For the first time, Daniel saw a spark of her true nature, not a prisoner, not a victim, but something far greater. "They will not stop," she warned. "You cannot fight them with guns." "Then tell me how to stop them," Daniel pleaded. Liara placed her hand over her chest, where a faint glow pulsed beneath her skin. "There is a way, but they must trust me, and they do not." Daniel met her gaze, determination burning in his eyes. "Then I'll make them trust you." Back on the command deck, the crew fought desperately as the swarm tore at their defenses. Commander Voss barked orders, but his voice carried the weight of fear. When Daniel entered with Liara at his side, every soldier turned. Weapons were raised. Instantly. "She shouldn't be out," one officer shouted. "She's our only chance," Daniel said, his voice firm. "She knows what these things are. You have to listen to her," the crew murmured angrily. Voss's face twisted with rage. "Cross, you disobeyed orders. You freed a prisoner in the middle of battle. Do you realize what you've done?" Daniel stood tall. "Yes. I gave us a chance to survive." All eyes turned to Liara. The alien stood calm and unshaken, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. And for the first time, the humans began to understand. She was not just a prisoner. She was their only hope. The Aurora shook as another wave of machines struck the ship's shields. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, and the crew scrambled to keep their stations under control. The alarms wailed, filling the command deck with a sound that pierced nerves and hearts alike. Commander Voss shouted over the chaos, "Fire all batteries. Do not let them breach the hull." Bright beams of plasma streaked into the void, striking the swarm. For a moment, the machines scattered like a cloud hit by wind, but then they regrouped and pressed forward again. The crew watched in horror as the swarm adapted to each shot. Weapons that had worked seconds ago grew weaker with every strike. "They're learning," a technician whispered. "Every second they're learning." Daniel stood in the middle of the command deck with Liara beside him. Soldiers kept their weapons aimed at her, but she ignored them. Her eyes were fixed on the display, where thousands of metallic fragments swirled like a living storm. "This is only the beginning," she said calmly. "If you keep fighting this way, you will lose." Voss glared at her. "And what do you suggest, prisoner?" Liara placed her hand against her chest, where a faint glow pulsed beneath her silver skin. "There is a signal, a control network. They move as one because they are guided as one. Break the signal and you break the swarm." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. It sounded impossible. Daniel stepped forward. "She's right. We've all seen it. They move like a hive, not like ships. If she has a way to disrupt them, we have to try." Voss's jaw tightened. He wanted to refuse to keep control of his ship, but the swarm slammed into the shields again, nearly tearing them apart. The red lights flickered, and sparks shot from the consoles. "Fine," Voss growled. "Explain yourself." Liara closed her eyes for a moment. The glow under her skin brightened, and when she opened them, her violet gaze was sharp and steady. "My people built devices long ago," she said. "Keys to resist the swarm. I carry one inside me." She touched the faint light at her chest. "It can release a signal strong enough to confuse the machines, but—" She hesitated. "Alone, my strength is not enough. It must connect with human energy. Your kind has what mine does not." The crew stared at her as if she were speaking magic. Daniel asked quickly, "Then what do you need from us?" Liara's eyes fell on him. "You." Daniel blinked. "Me?" She nodded. "Your energy can link with mine. Together we can make the signal strong enough to reach them." Voss slammed his fist on the console. "Ridiculous, this is a trick. You want us to trust an alien prisoner with the life of this ship?" But before anyone could reply, the ship jolted violently. A voice cried from the sensor station. "Shields down to 40%. We can't hold much longer." The crew's panic filled the air. Even Voss's face paled as he realized the truth. There was no other choice. Daniel stepped forward. "Sir, let me try. If we do nothing, we're all dead anyway. What do we have to lose?" For a long, tense moment, Voss said nothing. Then slowly, he gave a short nod. "Fine. But if this fails, Cross, it's on you." Liara led Daniel to the lower deck, away from the shouting crew and flickering lights. The ship shook around them as explosions rang out in the distance. They entered a small sealed chamber where the air was quiet and still. "This will be dangerous," Liara said. "Your body may resist. Your mind may feel broken. But if you trust me, we can survive." Daniel swallowed his fear. "I trust you." She reached out her hand. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. Then he took it. The glow from her chest spread down her arm, into her fingers, and into his hand. Daniel gasped as a surge of energy rushed into him, bright, hot, and overwhelming. Images flashed in his mind, worlds burning, endless swarms devouring cities, her people running in terror, and then a light, a desperate attempt to fight back. "Stay with me," Liara whispered, her voice steady. "Do not let go." Daniel gritted his teeth and held on. Back on the command deck, the crew watched the swarm press closer, tearing through the last of the shields, but then suddenly something changed. The swarm paused. Its movements became uneven, broken. Instead of flowing as one, the machines collided with each other, crashing into the void like confused birds. "What's happening?" a technician cried. "The signal," Voss whispered. "It's working." Inside the chamber, Daniel fell to his knees, sweat pouring down his face. The energy burned through him like fire, but he refused to let go of Liara's hand. Her violet eyes glowed brighter than ever, her face calm despite the storm around them. "Almost there," she whispered. "Just a little more." Daniel forced himself to stay upright. He thought of the crew, of the ship, of the people who had laughed at him. He thought of Earth, of the families waiting for them, of the lives depending on this moment. He shouted, through the pain, "Do it!" Liara closed her eyes and released a final surge of power. Outside, the swarm let out a soundless scream. The machines broke apart, spinning wildly. Some exploded, others drifted aimlessly, their lights fading. The storm that had seemed unstoppable now looked broken, confused, weak. Cheers erupted across the command deck. "It's working! They're falling back!" Voss gripped the console, his hard expression softening for the first time. "By the stars. They did it." In the chamber, the glow faded. Daniel collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. Liara knelt beside him, her hand still holding his. "You live," she said softly. Relief filled her voice. Daniel coughed and managed a weak smile. "We both do." For a moment, silence filled the room. No alarms, no shouting, only the steady hum of the ship's engines. Then Liara whispered, "This was only the first strike. They will come again, stronger." Daniel closed his eyes. He believed her, but for now, humanity still had hope, because he had chosen to trust her. The command deck of the Aurora was silent for a moment. The crew watched the broken swarm drift in confusion across the stars. For the first time, they saw the enemy retreat instead of advance. Then a cheer rose. Soldiers clapped one another on, the shoulders' relief flooding their faces. Some even laughed, the sound wild and shaky. But Daniel Cross did not cheer. He sat on the floor of the chamber, breathing hard, his body trembling from the power that had flowed through him. Liara knelt at his side, her hand still holding his, her violet eyes watching him carefully. "You survived," she whispered. Daniel forced a weak smile. "Thanks to you." But Liara's face stayed serious. "No, thanks to both of us. Alone, neither could win. Together, we made a weapon the swarm fears." When Daniel and Liara returned to the command deck, the mood shifted. The soldiers who had once mocked him now looked at him with wide eyes. Some nodded in respect. Even Raynor, who had sneered at him for weeks, avoided his gaze now. "Commander," Voss stepped forward. His face was hard, but there was a trace of something new, uncertain respect. "You disobeyed orders, Cross," Voss said. "You freed a prisoner. You risked the lives of everyone on this ship." Daniel swallowed, waiting for the punishment. "But," Voss continued, "you also saved us. Without you, we'd be wreckage floating in space. So for now, I will not question your choice." Daniel let out a slow breath. It wasn't praise, but it was close. Liara stepped forward then. "Listen, the swarm will return. This was not their full strength. They send scouts first. If scouts fail, they send the storm." The crew fell silent. "How many?" someone asked. Liara's voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. "Enough to erase worlds. My people tried to fight. We failed. Many died. Few escaped. The swarm does not stop until all is consumed." The silence grew heavier. Even the hum of the engine seemed dim against her words. Later, Daniel sat alone in the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly before him, their light cold and far away. He thought of Liara's words, "Erase worlds." The image of Earth came into his mind. Blue oceans, green fields, cities alive with people. Could the swarm reach it? He heard footsteps behind him. Liara entered quietly, her silver skin glowing faintly in the starlight. She stood beside him without speaking for a while. Finally, she asked, "Why do you look so heavy?" Daniel sighed. "Because I don't know if humanity is ready. You said your people fought and lost. If they couldn't stop the swarm, how can we?" Liara turned her head, studying him. "Humans are different. My people, we had power, but we lacked something. We did not trust easily. We fought alone. You, Daniel, you trusted me when no one else did. That trust is your strength." Daniel looked at her, surprised. "You think that's enough to fight an enemy like this?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "It is more than my people had." The next day, the Aurora's scanners lit up again. A much larger formation was approaching, thousands of signals stretching across the dark like a great storm front. The first battle had only been a warning. The real one was coming. Fear swept through the crew. Weapons were readied, but hope seemed thin. In the middle of the command deck, Daniel and Liara stood side by side. "You said we need to link again," Daniel said. Liara nodded. "Yes, but this time the swarm is greater. The device inside me can release more energy, but it must be amplified. That means you must go deeper into the connection. It will hurt more. Maybe too much." Daniel's throat tightened. "What happens if I can't handle it?" "Then we both die," she answered honestly. "And humanity soon after." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of his squadmates, even the ones who had mocked him. He thought of Earth, of the billions who lived there without knowing the danger that was approaching. He thought of Liara, who had trusted him when no one else did. He opened his eyes. Then we don't fail. The second battle began. The swarm arrived like a tidal wave, machines stretching across the void, blotting out the stars. The Aurora fired everything it had, plasma cannons, missiles, railguns. But it was like throwing pebbles at a storm. The machines adapted, weaving around the attacks, pressing closer. Hull breaches were reported. Fires spread through the lower decks. Crew members shouted in fear, their voices shaking. Daniel and Liara rushed back to the sealed chamber. Once again, they stood hand in hand. "Ready?" she asked. "No," Daniel admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The glow from her chest spread into him, stronger than before. Daniel cried out as the power surged, his body convulsing with the force of it, his mind filled with images, cities crumbling, stars burning, machines devouring all in their path. He saw Liara's memories, the screams of her people, the endless chase across the stars. But this time he also saw something new. His own people. The faces of his squad, his commander, his family far away. Humanity was not broken yet. They still had a chance. Liara's voice cut through the storm in his mind. Together, Daniel, do not let go. Through the pain, he gripped her hand tighter. On the command deck, the crew watched as the swarm suddenly slowed. A wave of static rippled across the machines, throwing their patterns into chaos. Some fired blindly at each other. Others froze, in place drifting helplessly. "It's working," a technician cried. "They're breaking apart." But the relief was brief. The swarm quickly adapted again, trying to rebuild its control. The signal was not strong enough to finish the fight. "We need more," Daniel shouted through clenched teeth, his body shaking. Liara pressed closer, her forehead touching his. "Then give more. Reach deeper. Humanity's strength is inside you. Find it." Daniel dug into his pain, into his fear, into his hope. He thought of Earth again, of the oceans, the children, the laughter, the lives that deserved to continue. He let all of it pour into the connection. The glow exploded outward. In the void, a wave of light burst from the aurora. The swarm convulsed, its machines crashing into one another, breaking apart in massive numbers. Fire bloomed in the dark as fragments exploded. The storm that had seemed endless was ripped apart by a single pulse of human and alien power combined. The crew erupted in cheers, but Daniel did not hear them. He collapsed, his strength gone. Liara caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him gently. "Stay with me," she whispered urgently. Daniel's eyes fluttered open. He was pale, weak, but alive. "Did we do it?" Liara looked at the fading swarm outside the window. Her voice was soft. "For now, humanity still breathes." On the command deck, Commander Voss stood silently, his eyes fixed on the two figures in the chamber. His soldiers no longer looked at Daniel with mockery. They looked at him with awe. The boy they had called foolish had become the one who carried them all, and Liara, once a prisoner, was now their savior. But the battle was not over. Everyone knew the swarm would return. Stronger. Smarter. For the moment, though, humanity had hope. And that hope rested on Daniel Cross, the outcast soldier who had dared to show kindness, and on Liara, the alien who had chosen to fight for a species not her own. Together, they were humanity's only hope. The battle was over, at least for now. The void outside the aurora was littered with the wreckage of the swarm. Small fragments drifted in the blackness, glowing faintly before disappearing into nothing. The crew moved cautiously, checking the ship for damage, tending to the wounded, and repairing the broken systems. Daniel Cross sat in the medical bay, his body bandaged and drained. Sweat clung to his skin and his muscles ached from the strain of the connection with Liara. Despite the exhaustion, his mind raced with what had happened. Liara knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. Her violet eyes were calm, but there was a flicker of worry beneath the surface. "You are strong," she said softly. "Few humans could survive that." Daniel tried to smile, but his lips trembled. "I didn't do it alone. You helped," she said. "Your courage, your trust. Without it, the swarm would have destroyed everything." Daniel closed his eyes. The weight of everything he had experienced pressed down on him. The mockery, the warnings, the disbelief. It had all led to this moment. He had chosen to help when no one else would, and that choice had saved countless lives. Outside the medical bay, the crew moved quietly. Many of the soldiers who had mocked Daniel now watched him with respect. Raynor, who had once sneered at him for feeding an alien prisoner, now avoided his gaze entirely, a mix of shame and admiration on his face. Commander Voss approached, his expression unreadable. He paused at the door of the medical bay, looking at Daniel and Liara together. "You disobeyed orders," Voss said, his voice firm. "You broke regulations, and you risked the ship." Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir, but we survived." Humanity survived. Voss's eyes softened slightly. You also taught us something. That sometimes following orders is not enough. Courage comes from doing what is right, even when others mock you. Daniel's chest filled with a quiet pride. Finally, the words he had longed to hear, not as punishment but as acknowledgement. Liara stood slowly, her movements graceful and steady. The swarm will return, she said. Stronger, smarter. We cannot stop them forever, but we can prepare. My people will help rebuild. And you, humans, must learn to trust yourselves and each other. Daniel looked at her. And what about your people? Will they come? She nodded. Some will. Many died. Some survived. We will fight, side by side with humanity, if you accept it. Daniel smiled faintly. We do. That evening, the Aurora held a quiet ceremony. The crew gathered to honor what had been accomplished. Flags hung in the corridors, lights glowed warmly, and a soft hum of music played from the ship's speakers. Daniel stood near the center, still weak but upright. Around him were the soldiers who had once laughed at him, the officers who had doubted him, and even the command staff who had questioned his judgment. Liara stood beside him, her silver skin shimmering softly in the light. The alien who had been, locked in a cell, feared and mocked, now held the gratitude of an entire human crew. Commander Voss stepped forward. Today, we survived because one soldier had courage when none others would. Daniel Cross chose kindness over fear, trust over mockery, and in doing so, he saved us all. The crew erupted in applause, some cheering, some clapping quietly. Daniel felt warmth fill his chest. He had never imagined that the ones who mocked him could one day stand in respect, but here they were. Raynor approached slowly. Cross, he began, hesitating. I was wrong. You were right all along. Daniel nodded without anger. It's okay. We all learn. That's what matters. Liara reached out and touched Raynor's arm gently. And now you know. The strength of trust, she said softly. Later, Daniel walked to the observation deck where the stars stretched endlessly beyond the ship's glass. Liara followed him, her presence quiet but comforting. You changed things, Daniel said, looking at the stars. Not just for the crew, but for everyone. You saved humanity. Liara shook her head. No, you saved humanity. I helped. But it was your choice that made the difference. You fed me when no one else would. You believed when no one else did. That is what saved them. Daniel smiled. I never imagined that something so small, like a piece of bread, could lead to all this. Liara's eyes glowed faintly. Small things often change everything. They stood in silence, watching the stars, feeling the weight of survival and the promise of the future. In the following days, repairs continued. The ship was strengthened, new weapons were installed, and the crew trained harder than ever. The memory of the swarm haunted them, but it also united them. Humanity had seen its weakness and survived, and the knowledge of Liara's help reminded them that trust and courage were powerful weapons. Daniel spent much of his time with Liara, learning more about her people and their technology. They discussed strategies, built plans, and even shared quiet moments of laughter. The bond they had formed was no longer one of prisoner and guard, but of partners and friends. Every time Daniel thought of the first day he fed her, the whispers of mockery came back, but now they seemed distant, almost meaningless. The choice he had made had proven itself in ways no one could deny. Weeks later, the crew gathered on the main deck. Liara stood at the center, looking at them with pride. We cannot be complacent, she said. The swarm may return, but we have learned. Humans are brave, humans are strong, and together, we are unstoppable. Daniel looked around at the faces of the crew. Soldiers, officers, technicians, and even those who had doubted him. He felt hope rising, not just for survival, but for the future. Commander Voss nodded at him. You've shown us that kindness, courage, and trust are as powerful as any weapon. Humanity owes you more than words can express. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. He looked at Liara, and she smiled, a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had endured together. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice strong and certain. We will be ready. Together, humans and those who stand with us will face anything. Nothing will stop us when we choose to fight, not with fear, not with anger, and never without trust. A cheer rose from the crew. Liara's eyes sparkled. Daniel's heart swelled, with pride. The boy who had once been mocked for feeding a prisoner had become a hero. And in that moment, the galaxy felt a little safer, because of courage, because of kindness, because of trust. The Aurora would sail on. Humanity had survived, and Daniel Cross alongside Liara had shown the universe what it truly meant to fight for life, for hope, and for the future.